My boss stood in the doorway of my cubicle, sweating through a dress shirt that cost more than my rent, and begged me to save the $4 million account I'd spent 6 years building. The biggest client we had, the one that paid for everybody's bonus, including his. And I looked up from my keyboard, slid a copy of our own employee handbook across the desk, and pointed to page 19. 6 weeks later, that client was gone, my boss was gone, and the intern they'd promoted instead of me was quietly updating his resume. I never raised my voice, I never broke a single rule. That was the entire point. But let me start from the beginning. I'll go by Renee. I'm 36. And for 6 years, I was a senior account manager at a mid-size marketing and logistics agency. The kind of place that's like a family, right up until the quarter it isn't. My whole job, really, came down to one relationship. A regional grocery chain I'll call Brightwater. 41 stores, a marketing budget with a comma in it, and a procurement director named Hank who trusted exactly one person at our agency, me. Brightwater was $4 million a year. On paper, it was the agency's single most important account, and on paper it ran like a machine. What the paper didn't show was why it ran like a machine, which was that I personally held the whole thing together with 1,000 small things nobody ever wrote down. And nobody ever asked me to. Remember that part. It matters more than anything else in this story. Let me tell you what holding it together actually meant. Hank liked to text, not email, and he liked answers fast. So I answered fast at 7 a.m. and 11 p.m. from my own phone on weekends, because a happy whale is a quiet whale. When a store had a grand opening and the official process said, submit a creative request, allow 5 business days, I just walk it through myself in an afternoon, because Hank hated process and I knew it. I knew his CEO liked blue, not teal. I knew which printer to never use again. I knew his assistant's kid's name. None of that lived in any system. It lived in my head because the agency had never once asked me to put it anywhere else. So here's what happened in March. The agency created a new role, Senior Account Director, to formally own the Brightwater relationship. More money, a seat in the strategy meetings, my name finally on the thing I'd been doing for free. My VP, a man I'll call Doug, told me over coffee it was basically a formality. His exact words, Renee, nobody else could even do this job. I believed him. I'd earned it 6 years over. 2 weeks later, the announcement went out to the whole company. They gave the role to Tyler. Tyler was 24. Tyler had been my intern. I had personally trained Tyler, taught him how to read a media plan, how to talk to Hank, which mistakes would get us fired. Nice enough kid. He was also $40,000 a year cheaper than me, and, I'd later learn, the nephew of someone Doug played golf with. The internal email called him a fresh, energetic voice for our flagship account. It also said, and I want you to feel this the way I did, that I would be staying on to mentor Tyler through the transition. I read that email 4 times. They'd passed me over for the kid I trained, and then asked me to train him again for the job that should have been mine. When I went to Doug, I got the speech, the budget, the optics. You're so valuable where you are. And then the line that flipped a switch in me, calm and final. Honestly, Renee, you make it look easy. We figured the account kind of runs itself at this point. The account kind of runs itself. That's when I understood. They had no idea what I actually did. because I'd spent 6 years making it invisible. Every favor, every after-hours text, every shortcut around their own broken process. They thought that was just how things naturally were. They thought the machine ran on its own. So I decided to show them the machine without me in it. I wasn't going to sabotage anything. I want to be clear because it's the whole point. I wasn't going to do one wrong thing. I was going to do everything right. Everything the company asked, exactly as written, and not one molecule more. That night I went home, and for the first time in 6 years, actually read the employee handbook. All 90 pages. And it was beautiful. It was a confession of everything I'd been quietly ignoring on the company's behalf. Client communications must be conducted through the official project management system to ensure tracking. Standard response window, 2 business days. All creative requests submitted via form allow 5 business days for review. Personal devices should not be used for client communication. Hours, 9 to 5. Overtime requires written pre-approval and accrued vacation, the 3 weeks I'd been too busy to ever take. Employees are encouraged to use their full balance. Every single thing I did to keep Brightwater happy violated the handbook. So I stopped violating the handbook. Overnight, I became the most compliant employee the company had ever seen. Monday morning, I was a model citizen. Hank texted my cell at 7:15, like always. Morning R. Need the Easter circular proof today. I did not reply from my cell because the handbook says I shouldn't. At 9:01, from my desk, I sent Hank a warm, professional note explaining that to serve him better, all communication would now flow through our official client portal, and that his new account director, Tyler, would be his primary contact. I CC'd Tyler, I CC'd Doug. Tracking, you understand? Exactly like page 19 wanted. Hank submitted his urgent circular request through the portal. Per policy, it entered the 5 business day review queue. I attended every meeting I was required to attend, and not one I wasn't. I took no texts, drove to no stores on Saturday, ate no small costs to smooth anything over. And, because the handbook encouraged it, I finally put in for all 3 weeks of accrued vacation with correct advance notice perfectly approved. Then I did the most devastating thing of all. I helped Tyler. Genuinely. I sat with that kid and walked him through every official procedure in the binder, by the book, flawlessly. What I did not do, because nobody required me to, because it had never once been written down anywhere, was hand him the invisible machine. The blue knot teal, the texting, the CEO's moods, the shortcuts. That wasn't in any system, and my new job description said, mentor on process. So I mentored on process. Tyler followed the handbook to the letter, exactly as he'd been taught, and the handbook had never built a relationship with Hank in its life. Brightwater's experience went from concierge to the DMV in about 9 days. Hank's urgent became submit a form. His 7 a.m. texts vanished into a portal with a 2-day SLA. The Easter circular came back late, and because Tyler didn't know about the blue, in teal, Hank escalated. Tyler followed procedure and escalated it back. Somewhere in week 3, Hank stopped being annoyed and started being quiet, which, if you know Wales, is the dangerous one. In week 4, Hank called the agency's main line and asked point blank for the woman who used to run our account. The receptionist, bless her, transferred him to me. And here's the part people always ask about. I didn't badmouth anyone. I didn't have to. I told Hank the simple, documented truth that I'd been moved off his account, that Tyler was now his director, and that I was happy to direct him to the proper channel. Every word straight off the org chart. Hank went very, very quiet and said, "So you're not my person anymore?" I said, "Not according to the company, no." That was the whole knife. I just let him hold it. That's when Doug appeared in my doorway, sweating, with the $4 million account on fire behind him. "Renee, I need you to jump in and save Brightwater. Call Hank. Fix this." And I slid him the handbook, page 19, and pointed. Saving Brightwater wasn't my role. It was the senior account director's. After-hours heroics weren't in my job description and required written pre-approval anyway. If leadership wanted me to own that account again, I'd be glad to discuss the title and the salary that came with it. In writing. They wouldn't put it in writing. Budget, you understand. Optics. So I went on my fully approved vacation. Brightwater's contract was up for renewal in June. They didn't renew. Hank, it turned out, had spent years telling his own bosses the agency was great, because I was great. And once I was gone, he couldn't defend the line item. $4 million walked out the door on schedule, by the book. And here's the part I save for the end. About a month after the non-renewal, Hank called me directly. On my personal cell, the one the agency told me never to use, and asked where I'd landed. By then, I'd taken a director role at a smaller, hungrier shop across town. I never solicited a thing. I didn't have to. Hank brought Brightwater to me. My new agency's biggest new client that year was the whale my old agency had handed to a 24-year-old to save 40 grand. Tyler's big promotion evaporated when the flagship account did. Doug, the man who told me the account ran itself, got to explain to leadership why it didn't. Last I heard, the agency restructured his department. Funny how that works. Everything I did was right there in the handbook. They just never expected anyone to actually follow it. So tell me, what would you have done? Swallow the insult and kept saving them for free, or closed the binder and gone strictly, perfectly by the book? Tell me in the comments. And subscribe, because next time on the Karma Archive, a woman spent 10 years putting her husband through dental school and running his practice's books for free, until she found the affair and realized the practice he swore was 100% his had her fingerprints on every single dollar.